Part 3. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 23. Now you have made a mark on your career path, but Ishihara-Rina's safety is like a curse lingering in your heart, making it impossible for you to relax at all. The novel The Reincarnation of a Succubus was successfully completed, and after the light adaptation of the manga became a hit, you earned a generous sum of royalties and adaptation fees, which is enough for you to live in Tokyo until you die of old age without having to gamble with your house. You have received a notice to participate in the Japan Tennis Open in October. This will be your first time on the world stage as a young professional player. Rina Ishihara is very happy about this and has prepared a feast for you. As the scene unfolded, Asaba Kazuma saw her taking the last dish out of the kitchen. Although it was not a delicacy, just ordinary ingredients ordered to be delivered to his home, the girl used her own limited savings to place the order and cook it for him. Asaba Kazuma was very happy eating. Rina Ishihara's family was obviously not poor, referring to the time when her parents had not passed away. Even ordinary company executives may not be so generous to own their own real estate in Tokyo. However, with the death of her parents, her burden was not so light when she lived alone in Tokyo. The driver who caused the drunk driving accident does not have that much money to pay compensation. In any place, the flesh and blood of the lower class tastes so painful that it makes people feel sad. Fortunately, the insurance pays out a lot. If you were an ordinary person, you could find a job that barely makes a living, and rely on this money to spend your whole life easily, provided that there are no accidents such as serious illness. Kazuma, aren't you going to train with the club today? Ishihara Rina was a little confused. During this time, Asaba Kazuma seemed to have nothing to do, and appeared at her house more and more frequently. She had heard him talk about the daily life of tennis players. Talents like teenagers have now joined the club and spend a considerable part of their time training in the club during the day. Especially recently, with the Japan Tennis Open approaching, he has officially transformed from an amateur to a professional. Wouldn't it be better for me to spend more time with my sister? Idiots like my sister look so pitiful. If I don't stay with you, I'm always worried that something will happen to you. Asaba Kazuma said something embarrassing to her with a smile. That's not what I meant. She probably felt that what she said made it sound like she didn't want Kinha Kazuma to come to her home, so she lowered her head and explained in a low voice. Then the little feet were placed in his arms, as if a little girl has nothing to repay, but can only make amends with her delicate feet. Asaba Kazuma rubbed her feet expressionlessly. This is Xiaozuo Xiao's unauthorized action. What does it have to do with Jianyu Fengjian? Sorry. Ishihara Rina seemed to feel that she had made a mistake and quietly retracted her feet, but Asaba Kazuma caught her and brought her to her side. He had a delicate smile on his face and didn't look at her. Ishihara Rina didn't dare to move, and quietly observed whether Jianyu Kazuma was angry. Kinyu Kazuma ignored her until she became more and more uneasy, then suddenly said, "Sister, I'm thirsty." Ishihara Rina got up and poured him a glass of water. "Sister, I want to eat strawberries." Rina Ishihara glanced at the strawberries on the table. The washed strawberries looked cute and appetizing. She carefully picked up the best-looking one and brought it to his lips. Asaba Kazuma slowly ate the strawberries. He didn't eat them whole, but took small bites and motioned for Rina Ishihara to grab them. From the tip of the strawberry to the base, I put the clean fingers in my mouth. Ishihara Rina didn't react. She blinked her eyes and looked at Asaba Kazuma blankly. The strawberries are okay. Kinha Kazuma paused for a moment and then added, the fingers are also good, but I can put some honey on them next time. It's weird to hold it in your mouth like this, Ishihara Rina said softly. Having said that, she was already considering placing an order for honey. Then I'll place an order later for a bottle of wild honey. In front of him, she has always been very obedient. Sister, you are so stupid, I didn't really ask you to buy wild honey. Qian Yufengma shook his head and said. Oh, oh, I thought you were angry. Rina Ishihara's experience today is also extremely rich. Asaba Kazuma rarely ate at her house, and even if she did occasionally, it was mostly with ingredients. It seemed that she was worried that one meal would overwhelm her. This made Rina Ishihara secretly curl her lips. She was not so poor. Today she knew that Asaba Kazuma would definitely come. After all, tomorrow was the open and he had clearly said that he would come to her house to celebrate. Stay the night at her house by the way. In Asaba Kazuma's words, her home is closer to the stadium. As for whether it was really close, Ishihara Rina didn't know. But she was looking forward to it. Change his slippers, prepare hot water, cook a big meal. This was the first time Asaba Kazuma agreed to her doing this. Even if she is as slow as she is, she still has wild thoughts when doing these things. After being teased like this again, I felt like my brain didn't work much tonight. When she came to her senses, the two of them had already gotten into her room and were ready to go to bed early. I'll sleep on the floor, you have to play a game tomorrow, she said softly. The tatami will be cooler, so you can sleep on it. He shook his head and refused. After a while, she climbed down from the bed, pushed him, and said with a trembling voice, "Go up and sleep. Then let's sleep together, and you're not allowed to go down." Kinya Kazuma blinked and said helplessly, "It would be great if my sister could listen to me in other aspects. Just check her temperature at any time. I'm a serious person." Ishihara Rina seemed to have finally come to her senses. The two of them were covered with a quilt, and she was panicked for a moment. "Sister, have you ever thought about going out to work in the future?" Kinha Kazuma said with his back to her. Ishihara Rina instinctively wanted to refuse. She just wanted to hide in this dark and narrow place. But it seemed that he was afraid of making him angry, so he didn't dare to say it. "Just tell me your true thoughts," Jianyu Kazuma said again. Rina Ishihara was silent for a moment and said, "I don't want to go out to work, not even to death. I'll be scared. Society is so scary." She suddenly remembered something, turned around, and said pleadingly, "I still have enough money in my card. You come over later and I will transfer the money for the ingredients to you. Don't spend money on me randomly. I heard that AA is very popular among students now." When Asaba Kazuma came to see her before, he brought a lot of food and drink. Could it be because she forgot about AA and was disliked by him? Thinking of this, she was a little frustrated. "I'm not angry, I just hope you don't do anything stupid." "Ah. I'm going to play a game tomorrow. If anything happens, you must tell me as soon as possible," Asaba Kazuma emphasized again. Rina Ishihara blushed, turned away, and suddenly couldn't help but smile. It was a misty and beautiful smile. That night, you slept at her house, and she did not refuse. Although they did not hug each other in the same bed, Ishihara Rina still felt that the home was warmer. You watch the news on your phone quietly. The title of the news is "There will be a power outage in some areas of Tokyo tomorrow," and tomorrow happens to be a very critical game in your life. When the scene unfolded, it was already the next day. Asahi Kazuma had already checked the medicines before going out. They were all new medicines. He even pressed his face against her forehead to confirm that she didn't have a fever while she was shy, and then she chose to go out. "Pay attention to safety on the road," Ishihara Rina said. "Contact me immediately if you have anything, don't bear it yourself." "Good." As soon as the scene changed, Asahi Kazuma was already standing in the tennis court. There was a buzz of people around. He will start to reach the peak of his career here. But from Ishihara Rina's perspective, an accident suddenly happened. She was preparing a victory feast for him, and she never thought that he would lose. Just in the middle of preparations, Ishihara Rina was in a trance, and suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. The situation became more and more severe, so she simply stopped and took her temperature. Strange, Why did you have a fever all of a sudden? She instinctively thought of what Asaba Kazuma said about contacting him. Last night, in bed, he watched her recharge her phone bill with his own eyes. But, today is a big event in her best friend's life. Go take anti-fever medicine. Fortunately, the medicine has not expired. She took the anti-fever medicine and wanted to rest on the sofa for a while. Drowsily, she felt that she had fallen asleep. Suddenly, an alarm bell rang, waking her up. She was shocked to find that her whole body was extremely hot and her body had become much weaker. It was not that she had never had a fever before, but she had never encountered such a situation. She was a little panicked for a moment. She was about to call him, but she gritted her teeth and stopped. Ishi Hararina, that is a major event in his life. Don't cause trouble to a good friend. With her body unable to exert any strength, she looked towards the door. He was very nice to her, so she didn't want to hold him back. But send him a text anyway. She had not left home for almost 2 years. She stood at the door and struggled for 10 minutes before finally deciding to step out of the house. But the next moment, the world was spinning, and she was sitting on her knees on the ground, like a fish that had landed. Suddenly, the door opened. Asahi Kazuma walked in, his eyes staring at Ishi Hararina, with an expression she couldn't understand, which made her panic. It was neither anger, nor surprise, nor dissatisfaction, nor disgust, nor any of the expressions she thought. He just stared at Ishi Hararina with that strange expression. Are you back?" she shouted. "Don't look at me like that, today is your game. I asked you to call me for help, right?" Chienu Kazuma said with difficulty. "Yes, but good friends should consider good friends." Ishi Hararina blinked and said, "This is a major event in your life." Chienu Kazuma suddenly came back from his trance. "Don't misunderstand me. I'm not angry. After all, I am also a fool who thinks about you." He took out his cell phone and waved it in front of her. Above is a text message he sent to the club, saying that there was an emergency today and he would not participate in the game. At this point, we're going both ways. He picked her up directly, walked to the taxi parked outside the door, and drove towards the hospital without looking back. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 24. You sent her to Genji International Medical Center, the best hospital nearby. Standing outside the emergency room, you fell into deep thought. Ishi Hararina's sudden high fever is a bit strange. You have always been a cautious person. You have prepared antipyretic medicine for her in advance. You also secretly measured her temperature before going out. Everything shows that Ishi Hararina does not have any symptoms today. 30 minutes after leaving Rina's house, you came to the tennis court and sent her a message. However, she did not reply. This is an almost impossible thing for Ishi Hararina. After all, she never leaves her mobile phone. You gave up the tennis match without hesitation and rushed home, but when you approached her house, you found her distress message. It was too fast. From no warning to high fever, to Ishi Hararina losing her ability to move, it took less than an hour. This is not in line with your understanding of fever. Fortunately, this time you were not late. The scene unfolds. When Rina Ishihara came out of the emergency room, Asaba Kazuma looked at the doctor with lingering fear and said, "Doctor, what's wrong with her?" The treating doctor shook his head and said, "It's just a simple fever. You brought me here too late. Did the fever last for a day and a night? If it had been a few hours later, I might have suffered from acute respiratory failure." Asaba Kazuma was stunned for a moment and said, "How is it possible? Before I left home, she didn't even have any signs of fever. She went from completely normal to having such a high fever that it was difficult to move in less than an hour." After hearing this, the doctor paused for a moment, and then said dryly, "Is the time accurate?" "Precise." The doctor said without hesitation, "Then it should be because she is too weak." Chienu Kazuma narrowed his eyes. "This is a lie. The doctor was not an actor, and his emotions were not in place, so he became suspicious. Do I need to come back for a follow-up check? It's necessary. After all, your little girlfriend's disease is relatively rare. You sense that the doctor is hiding something, but he obviously doesn't tell you what he thinks. After leaving his contact information and determining the time to come for a review, you stayed with Rina Ishihara until the next day. When she wakes up from her sleep, she sees you sitting next to the hospital bed, gently holding her hand, with lingering tiredness and worry on your sleeping face. She pushed the ends of your hair away with her hands. The night who came on the light will also feel tired looking at your face. The look in her eyes gradually changed. The scene unfolds. Ishihara Rina carefully picked up the apple in front of the hospital bed. She felt that her body had regained her strength while she was still holding the needle, and she peeled an apple with some difficulty. She was a little hungry and wanted to eat. After peeling the apple, she tilted her head and looked at the sleeping boy. Looking at his face, his eyebrows, and his lips, she suddenly understood why he liked to play with her feet and bite her fingers. She wasn't really stupid, she just thought it was him before, so she didn't care. Now, she was also a little greedy. Ishihara Rina gently poked Asahi Kazuma with her finger, and he opened his eyes drowsily. What are you doing? Let me sleep for another 3. Don't sleep first. Grandma said that sleeping while sitting up will make your neck stiff, she whispered. I peeled the apple for you. Kinya Kazuma had no choice but to stand up and take a bite of the apple. He always ate very quickly, gnawed everything clean in a few bites, and threw it into the trash can next to him. When Rina Ishihara saw him finish eating, she nodded and prepared to get another smaller apple. She is very hungry. The patient, please don't move around, Kinya Kazuma said lazily, just lie down and let me do it. He quickly peeled the apple and removed the core with a knife. He held the lunchbox he found out from nowhere in one hand and tapped her forehead with the other hand. Seeing the girl's big eyes blinking at him, his hand gently touched Ishihara Rina's smooth face. Her face is small, which is exactly the opposite of the heavy snow on her upper body. Her playful and plump red lips set off her soft cheeks, making her look particularly quiet. Rina Ishihara was a little embarrassed by what he saw, and was about to lower her head when Asahi Kazuma suddenly stepped forward, pecked her on the face, and then said with a smile, "Sister has been looking at me since the beginning. Why, do you want to taste it? Can I feed it to you?" The girl was so embarrassed that Xiaofei's cheeks were filled with embarrassment. She didn't know that he had just noticed it. You just teased me on purpose. What are you talking about, sister? I can be your savior. If it were any other girl, she would have shouted, little girl has nothing to repay, she can only pledge herself to me. Ishihara Rina was stunned for a moment, lowered her head, and began to seriously consider whether this was a good fit. On the 3rd day of hospitalization, Rina Ishihara was finally able to get out of bed and go home. When leaving, the doctor told you to come back for a review on time, and you readily agreed. After returning home, you finally turned on your phone as expected. You received a question from the person in charge of the tennis club. You knew you were wrong and communicated with the manager in a friendly manner. For a long time during this period, Rina Ishihara kept tilting her head. He was listening to the phone with his head and his face was a little pale. You pinch her cheek gently and tell her not to worry, tennis is not as important as her things. Then you received a call from editor Tamura from Denjiki Bunko, informing you of the follow-up situation of reincarnation of succubus. Not long after you put down the phone, the call from Shonen Jump came as expected, and there were only 2 words in the words. 1 word, reminder. You were worried that something would happen to Rina Ishihara, so you chose to stay at her home and take care of her for a while. After taking a bath that day, before going to bed, she stretched out her small feet and gently held your trouser legs, with a little worry in her eyes. You are a little helpless, she seems to think you like this very much. You scolded her sternly, and then held her there for half an hour until her eyes were filled with mist, and then you let her go. The next day, Rina Ishihara invited her online best friend Kimura Goblin for the first time, and explained to you that you were her most important person in reality. Satisfied, you forgave her for inviting Kimura Goblin. Kimura Fairy felt extremely excited when she found out that her only good friend in Tokyo turned out to be a beauty, but when her eyes glanced at her upper body, she suddenly lowered her head in shame. Lost. After Fairy Kimura came to you to ask about some light novel tips, she secretly told you that the reason why she came to disturb the world between the two of them was because Rina-chan was worried that you would affect her life because of her body. After Kimura Goblin came home that night, you hugged her into bed, kissed her neck gently, felt her body temperature, her heartbeat, and her smell, and agreed to Kimura Goblin accompanying Rina during the day. In the simulation space, Qian Yufengjian became angry with shame. Where's the picture? Where's the picture? Where's the picture? Where is my most important picture? This is great progress. If you don't transfer the memory scene when it's time to transfer it, what's the use of you? FW1. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 25. Although he was somewhat annoyed because he couldn't absorb the memory of his own incense tasting, he was happy that with the goblin taking care of him during the day, he didn't have to worry about anything going wrong with Rina. From this point of view, apart from being made into a puff and used as a tool for promotion, the goblin is still very capable. You guided the goblin to write a light novel in exchange for the goblin taking care of Ishihara Rina during the day. After that, you returned to the tennis club and proved how strong you were with your iron-like strength. At this time, your understanding of tennis skills has reached a considerable level. Amateur players are nothing in your hands. Ordinary professional players are like a chicken and a dog to you. The club manager doesn't care about you not coming to participate in the competition before. Very dissatisfied, but he can't refuse you. You shine so brightly, everyone's eyes will be attracted to you when they watch you striding across the tennis court. The club manager chose to look again, but your eyes had not been on him for a long time. After you and the doctor agreed, you took her to the hospital with you by your side. It seemed that the sunlight outside the door was not so dazzling because her eyes are all on you. As the scene unfolds, Rina Ishihara has completed the review and is hiding in the corner silently. Asaba Kazuma stood in front of the doctor. After reading the report, the doctor said, "Nothing is wrong. Don't worry." Really, Kinya Kazuma showed a happy expression on his face. Really, the doctor replied seriously. Asaba Kazuma quietly glanced at Ishihara Rina in the corner, and then said, "Doctor, in today's modern society, many things cannot be hidden." Huh, the middle-aged doctor frowned. "I heard that you have encountered the same patient as my girlfriend before," Asaba Kazuma said with a smile. The doctor was silent for a moment and handed over a postcard. "Are you threatening me?" "No, no, no, I'm just curious. After all, I can't lose her, she is the most important person to me," Chienyu Kazuma said. "Funakoshi Hayato, my name." He handed over a postcard. "You have reached an agreement with Ishihara Rina's attending physician and made an appointment for the next meeting. 1 month later, Ishihara Rina has no more physical problems, Kimura's Dark Elf is officially released, and your tennis journey has begun. Today, the #1 tennis player in Japan is Ryo Kawanishi, who lost a tennis Grand Slam a few years ago. But Ryo Kawanishi is far less valuable than you. A good-looking Grand Slam player, doesn't even need a Grand Slam. The value you can create can make any club excited. You have impressed the club manager with your appearance and ability. You stepped onto the field again, and this time, you lived up to expectations and won the game. A few days after the competition, it was finally time for you and Dr. Funakoshi to meet privately. Location, in a tea ceremony booth. Asaba Kazuma poured a cup of tea for Dr. Funakoshi and said in a deep voice, Doctor, can you tell me what's going on with Rina now? Funakoshi Hayato sighed and said, I really don't want to tell you these things. Asaba Kazuma shook his head and said, what kind of truth is it that doctors know the cause but can't explain the truth? What kind of truth is it that they choose to conceal a preventable disease and do nothing to save it? These words were like a needle pricking him, causing Dr. Funakoshi's expression to change. After hesitating for a moment, he walked to the door and closed it quietly. What happens next is only known to you and me. Once you leave this door, just pretend it didn't happen. Of course, I have a very strict tone. Funakoshi Hayato thought for a moment and said, it was almost 16 years ago, when I had just graduated from the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Tokyo and worked at the affiliated hospital with my mentor. That year we encountered 3 strange patients. Just like your girlfriend, they fell unconscious with fever in a very short period of time. One of them had acute respiratory failure when he was brought to the hospital and died in the car. There were 2 patients, one of whom fell directly on the operating table, and the other was rescued by luck. Dr. Funakoshi raised his head and looked at him and said, Tokyo is very big and there are many patients who need treatment. Although the probability of respiratory failure is very small as long as the early stage of fever is handled properly, it is not impossible. But the family of the patient who fell on the operating table said that they would take us to court because her son's time from fever to respiratory failure was about the same as your girlfriend's. The matter was finally handled and all the evidence showed that there was no problem with our handling of the patient. This was not our fault and everything was an accident. After all, human life is too fragile. Doctor, what do you mean? Dr. Funakoshi sighed, this symptom aroused the curiosity of my teacher. He specifically found the information of several previous patients and found that the statements from the family members were surprisingly consistent. After a fever, within a short period of time, the fever reached the point where I almost lost the ability to move. This is what these patients have in common. At that time, we used existing medical instruments for repeated analysis, but no proof was obtained. All the results showed that it was an ordinary fever, so I later forgot about it. Until the same nightmare happened to my daughter, routine procedures such as antipyretics and cooling bags failed to relieve her high fever. I realized something was wrong, so I sent her to the hospital as quickly as possible. And then I lost her. My condolences. Asahi Kazuma could only say this to him. He could understand Dr. Funakoshi's mood. After all, he had experienced it. Doesn't this disease have any symptoms? Yes, the probability of occurrence is very small, the age is uncertain, conventional instruments cannot detect abnormalities, and ordinary antipyretics are completely ineffective. If you cannot get timely treatment, you can only rely on the body's immune system to self-regulate. Because of this incident, my teacher and I conducted relevant research again. Are there any research results? Chienyu Kazuma said seriously. It is a genetic disease, a disease that is almost difficult for modern medicine to effectively identify and treat. The bad news is that the source of the disease cannot be traced, ordinary medical equipment cannot detect it, and there is even no way to get effective treatment. During the outbreak, you need to rely on ICU to survive. The good news is, this disease seems to occur once, and as long as it can be overcome, no patient who has survived has suffered from it again. Genji Medical is backed by the Genji Foundation, which funded my teacher's research into this type of disease. In the following years, we encountered similar patients one after another. Most of them did just have ordinary fevers, but there were a few people who had exactly the same symptoms as we encountered back then. Later, my teacher determined that the main culprit causing this malignant high fever and respiratory failure was genetic. However, contemporary medical research on genes is still far from enough to support our continued research. After a few years, Genji Medical decided that the disease was not profitable and gave up on further research. However, we have not stopped tracing the origin of the patients. All the patients in subsequent investigations have not shown signs of this disease again, but we have discovered a strange phenomenon. Asahi Kazuma once again poured the doctor a cup of tea. Please tell me. So far, 4 people have been rescued. It's not convenient for me to say more about the conditions of 2 of them, but 2 of them are already well known. I don't know if you have heard of them. One of them is our number 1 Japanese men's tennis player, Ryo Kawanishi. The other person is Shion Akane, a musical genius who has been active on the world violin stage in recent years. Including the other 2 people I am not comfortable talking about. After surviving, without exception, they showed talents in some fields that are difficult for ordinary people to understand, far exceeding the talents defined by ordinary geniuses. Judging from the results alone, the survivors all have surprising talents in certain fields. This is likely to be a genius disease that cannot be recognized for the time being. Qian Yufengjian's eyebrows jumped. For some reason, he suddenly remembered the adjustment gene obtained from Goldfinger. Then I remembered the adjuster mentioned in the opening introduction of Kyunulu, Love is War 2077. Finally, he remembered the high fever that caused his death, which also directly caused him to lose the ability to move, so he, a lonely soul in another world, successfully occupied the magpie's nest. Are there any subsequent signs of this disease? He asked. No, the person in charge of Genji medicine even thinks this is the curse of genius. Over the years, they seem to have been looking for this type of people, and they have actually found that a small number of industry geniuses have had similar experiences. None of them have exceptionally, there has been no recurrence of the disease. But I suggest that you and your girlfriend should not reveal her situation, hide it, keep it deep in your heart. I really can't say much else. Kinyo Kazuma nodded, thoughtfully in his heart. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 26. The situation is more complicated than you think. You suspect that the cause of Ishihara Rina's death was the result of the activation of the adjustment gene, but you are completely blank in the field of medicine. Just doubting it is of no use. Fortunately, none of the patients known to Genji Medical have experienced similar symptoms after the high fever. The related content of reincarnated succubus has become longer after being optimized for the 3rd time, and you also plan to start your next step of training, Tiao, Xiao, for Ishihara Rina as planned. The scene unfolds. The scene appears in Ishihara Rina's bedroom. The light in the room was a little dim, and only the weak light reflected on Ishihara Rina's face, showing a quiet and vivid side face, with long eyelashes, a straight bridge of the nose, and rosy and plump lips. Asahi Kazuma actually wanted to laugh. Just now he tentatively held Rina in his arms. She struggled for a while, but finally she didn't move. Holding her in his arms, he could feel even more how obvious the rippling blue waves were. Sister, I've finished writing volume 6 of the Reincarnated Succubus. I'm going to go to the Denjiki Bunko tomorrow. I saw my sister's painting. As soon as he said this, Ishihara Rina, who was originally nestled in his arms, stiffened and began to struggle. Memory is the carrier of emotions, but drawing paper is the past that Rina Ishihara left behind in her memory. This time, the simulated Rina Ishihara still described her life on paper. The only difference is that this time the ending of the comic is no longer waking up from the dream, but a wedding between just him and her. Chien Kazuma stood up and leaned on the bed. Sister, the illustrations of Succubus Reincarnated have been widely praised. You should rest assured that you are not a burden. The last 2 volumes of Succubus Reincarnated will serve as the beginning of your new journey, sister. Rina Ishihara, who was hiding in his arms, raised her head, her tears falling like pearls on his pajamas, as if she was recalling the nightmare of her parents, and as if she was trapped in the room and felt helpless like a caged bird. Help, and the warmth he held in his hand and quietly brought to the sun. Asahi Kazuma helped her wipe away her tears. The weather was starting to get colder. Maybe it was because she had her feet exposed all the time, so her hands and feet were a little cold. He first put her palms in his arms to keep her warm, and then lifted her whole calf up and placed it on top of him. Now she has almost no defense against herself. If he wanted to, he could just lift up the loose nightgown and hide in it, and soon the last barrier between the two of them would be released. But that's not the case with him. He wanted to see this melancholy and pessimistic stupid girl showing a relieved smile, and then cruelly take over everything about her. What's the point of tricking a stupid girl? If he was willing, with a little force, without caring about Ishihararena's feelings, she would have been deceived into giving birth to a child in this small room day and night. Why boil a frog in such warm water? Developing the treasure girl with your own hands, making her dazzling and dazzling, turning her into a goddess in the comics world, and then taking over everything in her shyness, isn't this sense of accomplishment more interesting than bullying her directly? You go to the Dengeki Bunko editorial department and find your editor Yuzuki Tamura. You have a high degree of recognition for this editor who has taken care of you in several simulations, but today you have to make a presumptuous request to him. The scene unfolds. Venue, Dengeki Bunko conference room. Editor Tamura frowned and said, you mean you want to change the illustrator? Asaba Kazuma nodded and said, Mr. Tamura, you should know that I am now a professional tennis player and do not have much energy to devote to this aspect. This request is very presumptuous, but I have found a level that is even still there as an illustrator above me. You can trust my judgment first. Asaba Kazuma blinked and said jokingly, it's like you agreed to my presumptuous request. Light novels and illustrations can be said to be two inseparable parts. The two are bound to each other and constitute the core elements of light novel culture. Generally speaking, in order to ensure that their light novels can sell well, editors will make as reasonable arrangements as possible when selecting illustrators for authors. Popular authors like Asaba Kazuma must choose the best. Excellent. But, when Asaba Kazuma asked to change the illustrator, his novel had not yet taken off. Just as he and Ishihara agreed, he wanted to be her paintbrush to verify her excellence to the world. So he approached editor Tamura without any scruples. After editor Wadamura expressed his request, editor Tamura said that he would consider that this frequent change of illustrators actually had potential risks. This risk needs to be borne by Yuzuki Tamura to a large extent. Asaba Kazuma still remembers that time when Tamura Yuzuki patted him on the shoulder, turned around and walked out of the office to smoke. He went to the bathroom to wash his face. When he was about to walk out of the bathroom, he suddenly heard a conversation between Tamura Yuzuki and another old employee in the smoking area outside. Looking at him, it's like meeting you when you were a light novel author. Do you think you can suppress this young author? An old editor said with a smile. I'm still at my peak, the sound of Yuzuki smoking cigarette sounded. But you are getting old after all, and Asaba Kazuma is more motivated than you, the man said with a smile. I have more work experience, and I know exactly what I was thinking back then, just like I can guess what Jianyu was thinking. So are you going to reject that kid's request without hesitation, just like your editor did to you back then? The scene outside was silent for a while, leaving only the heavy sound of smoking. After a long time, the senior's voice sounded again. No, I'll go talk to the editor-in-chief. Why? The old employee's voice was filled with surprise. Because I am so high-spirited that I shouldn't lose, Yuzuki said dully. He has great potential, so I am willing to take a gamble for him. Then, Asaba Kazuma saw Yuzuki walking into the editor's office again, and a red-hot quarrel broke out inside. Recalling all the events at that time, Jianyu Fengjian felt a little emotional for a moment. It's not so much that Yuzuki Tamura is challenging the rules, but rather that he chooses to take responsibility for himself. This is allowed. Just like the domestic online article editor in the previous life, the editor has the power to choose books to sign, but he also has to shoulder the performance indicators. It would be nice if Asaba Kazuma's book sales increased after changing the illustrator. If there is no improvement, or even regression, then the blame will be thrown directly on Tamura Yuzuki. That's how it is in the workplace. The more you do, the more mistakes you make. So the old fried dough sticks chose not to do it. As long as they don't do it, it will not be wrong. But Yuzuki Tamura is different. He chose to believe in his author and take the initiative. As for the bet is on the position of the editor beneath you. Fortunately, he won the bet. Thinking of this, Asaba Kazuma smiled and said to editor Tamura, "What do you think of my illustrations? It is no exaggeration to say that it is astonishing. That's why I asked her to come. She is my master in illustration, a genius that I will never catch up with in my entire life." "Really? Really? I'll go talk to the editor-in-chief." We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love. Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 27. Yuzuki Tamura helped you revise the illustrator contract for Succubus Reincarnated. You know that from today on, the world will witness with its own eyes what a true illustrator genius is. In your sophomore year, you gave up your relative's house and came to Ishihara's house with a small package. During the day, you were playing tennis, and Rina Ishihara was helping you draw illustrations. At night, you slept in the same bed in tacit understanding. Reincarnation Succubus Volume 6 was released. Ishihara Rina was scrolling through Twitter nervously, eager to see other people's comments. You know, what she worries about is never that she will be hit, but that her incompetence will affect you. But you already knew that she would be greeted with praises like snowflakes. In the month after the first monthly sales came out, a hurricane named Ishihara Rina swept through the light novel world. That night, you looked at her shining eyes and your heart moved. The scene unfolds. Asaba Kazuma thought of the goal she had set on the day she first traveled through time, and angrily denounced the fact that dogs don't even talk about real love. She secretly lamented that time has played a trick on people. Fortunately, this was a simulation, and her heart was set on fire in the simulation. There should be no problem. That's right, I'm not tempted, I'm still the handsome Tokyo guy who doesn't fall in love. What does Asaba Kazuma in the simulation have to do with Asaba Kazuma in reality? As he said this, he rubbed Ishihara Rina a little harder. The girl let out an inaudible muffled sound, and when she saw him looking over, she was embarrassed to retract her feet. Chien Yufazuma didn't do it, and just rubbed her feet slowly and slowly until he was covering her feet. The temperature, it rose all the way up her body and stopped only when her whole body was hot. Along with the burning heat in her body, there was also a feeling of peace of mind that poured into the girl's heart. Wow! Kinyo Kazuma muttered silently in his heart, and made a righteous break with the past as if nothing had happened. "Are you confident?" "Sister, I said you would become the king of comics." A little bit. She was silent for a moment, looked at Kinyo Kazuma blankly and said, thank you, thank you. But sister, you have been reading comments on Twitter today, so you have less time to wash your feet before going to bed." "Will it not be washed clean?" Asahi Kazuma said, shaking her head in disgust. Ishihara Rina shyly retracted her feet and whispered, "It's very clean. I washed it twice. I will transfer the illustrator's money to your card." "Sister, do you want to help me with Prince of Tennis?" "If my sister helps me, I can go out and play tennis properly." "And doesn't my sister like it?" "It is a work that belongs to both of us, and the money transferred will be used as a small fund for you and me to run our families. After all, now I am here to live and eat." Qian Yufengjian paused for a moment, pretending to be helpless, and said, "Or is my sister unwilling? After all, she was disliked by her because she is not as handsome as the other brothers." "You look good," she said blankly. "But sister doesn't take action." "If you don't take action, you will lose a lot of things." At this time, Ishihara Rina probably also noticed that Asaba Kazuma had been staring at her. Hearing what he said, Ishihara Rina's eyes flashed with confusion. She actually didn't think about love at first. The day Asahi Kazuma came in, she felt that she had been bullied, and her face was full of weariness, grievances, and doubts, but now she seems to be doing well. He inserted himself so suddenly into her dark life, and seemed to have no intention of leaving. She also understood that she had become accustomed to living with him, and even learned to call for help from him when in danger. When she thought about her future without him, her heart trembled, and she gently pulled the corner of his clothes. "Kazuma, as long as I call you, will you definitely come to save me?" Kinya Kazuma was stunned for a moment and said firmly, "Yes. Whenever. No matter when, this is a privilege that only you have, sister." Rina Ishihara suddenly couldn't help but smile. She looked silly and cute, but her smile was like the sunshine blooming after pushing away the fog. It was so beautiful that Asahi Kazuma was stunned. Rina Ishihara got up from the bed and ran out of the room. Asahi Kazuma didn't know why, but she came back quickly. When she came back, she had an extra bank card in her hand. She grabbed the bank card with both hands and handed it to him. She said with a somewhat nervous expression, "This is the card at home. You can use it for our daily expenses in the future." Qian Yufengjian was silent, and after a while he said, "I remember correctly, your entire net worth, even the compensation from your uncle and aunt are in it, right? This is your life and fortune." Ishihara Rina shook her head and said stubbornly, "Kazuma, you gave up the game and came back to me, didn't you also give up your future?" She paused for a moment and said seriously, "I trust you in the fund that is run by my family." She remained motionless in this posture, obviously unwilling to take it back. Asahi Kazuma couldn't describe his inner thoughts for a moment. He knew Ishihara Rina's password. If he wanted to trick her, he only needed to use his hands and feet a little, and Ishihara Rina might quietly hide in a corner, and then make no noise. Dead. The money in this card was her only hope of living, and now she put her life and fortune in his hands. "Sister. Seriously, come be my comic assistant. From now on, all the money from comics and novels will be transferred to this account." Ishihara Rina bet on her future, and you also made your own choice. Something sprouted at this moment, and your relationship reached a new level. Since then, your career path has been on the fast track with the cooperation between you and Ishihara Rina. The popularity of Prince of Tennis has become more and more popular. The exquisite painting style and the muscular sense full of wild charm have made this comic break away from the world. The title of Superpower Tennis gives people an extremely real and passionate tennis experience. The adapted version of The Prince of Tennis is a huge hit, but your road to tennis is not that smooth. You are always worried that Rina Ishihara will have problems when you leave, even if Fairy Kimura is willing to accompany her. So whenever you encounter foreign competitions in recent years, you just choose to give up if they are far away. Ishihara Rina doesn't want to see you give up your career because of him, and wants to buy you a private jet. This will consume a quarter of your small treasury, but you can also pursue your dreams. Seeing this, Kinya Kazuma suddenly smiled. He didn't expect that now, he would be worried by Ishihara Rina, but he knew his purpose very well. It was not tennis from the beginning. You refused and told her that you just wanted to challenge the strongest player in the tennis profession and had no interest in winning a tennis Grand Slam. You know in your heart that for you now, all you have to do is improve your own strength, and then redeem this ability through the achievement store. Reputation is just like a passing cloud to you. If you want to communicate with top players, you have more methods, such as money-making ability. You invested 1 billion yen and held an event called Dark Tennis, inviting tennis players from all over the world to participate. As long as they can beat you, they can take away 1/10 of the prize money. If they lose, they must keep it. Download your most commonly used tennis racket. This move caused an uproar, and as time went by, tennis players who wanted to make money began to come from all over the world to compete. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 28. Chien Kazuma looked at it for a while and laughed a little. What dark game? As expected of me, I want to mention simulation rewards, but the operations are so abstract. He continued to read. Some reporters found out that you are the cartoonist of the popular Prince of Tennis cartoon, or that you are an active professional tennis player. Some commentators jokingly said that you drew materials directly from the professional circle. The dual temptation of fame and money finally attracted a wave of second-rate professional players. However, several consecutive games ended with your victory. Dark tennis has caused more and more repercussions in the tennis world, and you have truthfully told the outside world that there is another person who is mainly responsible for the painting work of the Prince of Tennis, and calls her a real genius. The media captured your praise for the unknown ghost writer at the press conference, because at that moment, the smile on your face carried a kind of transcendent beauty. Some people fell in love with the boy's eyes and lips. The young man smiled like the sunshine on an autumn afternoon, and then continued to sink. Some people say that you are the best tennis player among cartoonists, the best manager among tennis players, and the best cartoonist among managers. Only your opponents know that in every game, no matter whether you are strong or weak, you are quickly absorbing their skills to become stronger. One day, you suddenly got into the mood and took Rina Ishihara out with you. The scene unfolds. Kinya Kazuma took her hand and took her out the door. The moment the sun fell on her body, she suddenly felt a bone-chilling cold, but the warmth in her hands gave her courage. On a sunny morning, it seemed that with him, it became less scary. Kinya Kazuma didn't dare to take her to a place that was too busy, and was only prepared to let her get used to it. After staying outside for a few hours, on the way home, Asahi Kazuma suddenly saw a newly opened bridal shop. The beautiful wedding dress unfolded like waves in the window, attracting Ishihara Rina's attention. Chien Yufengjian looked amused, and suddenly a strong idea came to her mind. She took a step forward and whispered in her ear. Would you like to go inside with me and take a photo, if sister likes it? Ishihara Rina's face showed an indescribably complicated confusion. She hesitated for a long time and then said, Is this so fast? Asahi Kazuma's eyes darkened, and she smiled again and said, What's so fast? I just saw that my sister seems to like the wedding dress, so I just went to leave a wonderful memory. Rina Ishihara shook her head hard and opened her mouth to say something, but finally stopped speaking in despair. The day after you took her out, you received a message. The club manager told you that you were in trouble. Some media said that Ryo Kawanishi planned to participate in the competition. The current #1 tennis player in Japan has a lot of reputation among the people. He is a real sports star. Now he is eyeing you, but you don't take it seriously. Your eyes were drawn to something else. It was one afternoon, after you finished participating in the competition, you found that Rina Ishihara was not at home. The scene unfolds. When Asahi Kazuma returned home, he saw an empty room. At this point in time, Rina Ishihara should be accompanied by Fairy Kimura, and the two of them are finishing the manga manuscript and writing the light novel. But there was no sign of them in the room now. He frowned slightly and took out his cell phone to call Ishihara Rina. She quickly answered the call and said in a panic that she was shopping outside. Kinya Kazuma felt a little dizzy. It has been a year and a half since the Tokyo blackout. Perhaps because she got some courage from him, Ishihara Rina was still able to walk out of the house occasionally accompanied by her. But this is the first time I go out alone. For some reason, he felt a little uncomfortable. I don't know whether to be happy that she took this brave step, or sad that I am no longer the special one to her. Such thoughts made him a little annoyed, but he couldn't control his emotions and let them grow wildly. Seeing her delay in returning, Asahi Kazuma walked out uneasily and saw Rina Ishihara in the supermarket opposite her home, carrying a bag and looking at the neighbors queuing up, feeling a little at a loss. Kinya Kazuma shook his head, walked forward, stood beside her, and did not help her take the things to pay. But she still breathed a sigh of relief and reluctantly completed the payment. He then took the bag from her hand and led her back home. Kinya Kazuma didn't say much, he just quietly led her towards home. The two of them walked very slowly. Ishi Hararina didn't rush her. The warmth of being held by him was still there. She hoped that this time could last a little longer, it would be great if she could stay at this moment forever. It was a short journey, but it seemed like they had walked for a long time. When they came back to their senses, the two of them were already at the door of their house. I'm back, she whispered as she walked into the door. Well, the meal is ready, Kyanba Kazuma said. Ishi Hararina was shocked. You have been together for a long time, and most parts of her body have been explored. She still blushes, but she also begins to acquiesce to your closeness likewise, so does she. She is used to your smell, your movements, your emotions, she tolerates everything about you, and she also notices that you seem a little unhappy at this time. She glanced at Kinha Kazuma, put down the bag in her hand, poked him with her finger, and took out an unopened package from the bag. It's a set of black stockings with letters that are quite unaffordable. She was as innocent as a little rabbit, and she stammered a bit and said, you can wear it at night. Kinya Kazuma turned his head and glanced at her, then deliberately threatened her with a sullen face and said, don't tell me when you go out. Then his expression softened again and he said, I'm very happy to be able to go out, but if my sister wants to talk to me, do you know how worried I am? Ishi Hararina was inexplicably offended by him. She raised her head and glanced at Asahi Kazuma blankly, hesitated for a moment and said, I haven't washed my feet yet. Qian Yufengjian spat and said a little embarrassedly, who asked you to put on black silk stockings with letters and apologize now? Ishi Hararina shook her little feet, stretched out her feet and lightly touched his insteps. After a while, he said again, you will feel better after eating and taking a shower. Only then did a relieved expression appear on her face. She has always been thin-skinned, and it was impossible for her to make such an action when the goblin was around, and even less so when the goblin was away. Because she knew he would grab her feet relentlessly and make her repeatedly wander between discomfort and comfort. Although she didn't know why he was angry, she didn't want him to be angry, so she could only endure it until her body started to tremble. Then she gently pushed Kinha Kazuma and said, no, don't do this. He shook his head helplessly. Ishi Hararina's body was full of alluring postures, but she was too shy. Facing her clear and shy face always made him want to bully her even more. You decided to take a shower first to calm down. When Ishi Hararina stretched out her hand to stop you, she accidentally touched your trouser pocket. A crisp sound of hard objects colliding was heard. She tilted her head and looked at you in confusion, as if thinking about what you were putting in your trouser pocket. What? You tell her fiercely that that is something she cannot know now, and she feels aggrieved and stops talking. That night, she obediently put on black stockings with letters. The weather in Tokyo was a bit cold, and the dew outside the window wetted the peonies. You felt that she was a little uneasy, so you hugged her gently until you both shed a thin layer of sweat. She gently licked the sweat off your collarbone like a kitten. It was salty. You didn't say much, just hug her tightly. She understood what you meant, curled up in your arms with peace of mind, and fell asleep. The carriage of time is accelerating. In the next month, your fighting in the dark tennis arena becomes more and more intense. You invest all the sponsorship fees for broadcast rights into the prize pool. The already impressive prize pool becomes even larger. Its strength has also begun to be recognized by the players. Ishi Hararina and the fairies start to go out more frequently, but every time they will send you a message in advance. Your training time is getting longer and longer, and you are coming home later and later, but every time you come home, she will make a meal and wait quietly in the living room for you to come back. Suddenly one day, you told her that you had something you wanted to give her. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui. Chapter 29. Suddenly one day, you told her that you had something you wanted to give her. The scene unfolds. Asaba Kazuma stood in front of Ishihara Rina, and handed a sealed manuscript to her hands with great solemnity, saying, "Tomorrow the game will be broadcast. I want to fight Kawanishi Ryo. If I beat him, I will be Japan the strongest tennis player. When that time comes, just open the file bag." Ishihara Rina tilted her head, not knowing what she thought of, and nodded seriously and said, "Asahi Kazuma is the strongest." After a pause, she emphasized again, "You are the strongest. You have embarked on a journey, and what greets you this time is an unprecedentedly powerful enemy. Ryo Kawanishi is different from any tennis player you have played against before. You know that he is most likely the owner of the awakening gene, and this awakening gene may also have a sports physique. The fight between you was extremely intense. The back and forth attacks between the two sides made the spectators' hearts beat wildly. This is a scene that is difficult to see in most tennis matches, because the two people standing on the court are all monsters in this field. However, you realize that you may be in some trouble. Although the skills between you two are similar, your physical fitness is inferior to Ryo Kawanishi. Once you do not gain enough advantages at the beginning, you are likely to be dragged into the quagmire of physical exhaustion. After you completed another smash, during the break, you glanced at the audience. Suddenly, a look of surprise appeared on your face. Rina Ishihara was shivering and hiding in the corner, holding an unsealed document in her handbag. You were a little surprised by her arrival. When you saw the opened bag, you understood what she meant. The scene unfolds, and this time, the screen is locked on Rina Ishihara. The sun was shining brightly outside the window. After Ishihara Rina woke up, she raised her head and looked at the window sill. There were pots of daffodils in full bloom above. She stretched and remembered that Asahi Kazuma had a game today. She looked at the document sheet on the table, tilted her head, and looked at the document bag. She was a little curious about what Asahi Kazuma put in it. It can't be a marriage registration document, right? Oyster, oyster, oyster. How can it be? The movement was so big that I accidentally dropped the document bag. With a swipe, the document bag fell to the ground. It was not sealed properly, and the manuscript paper inside was scattered all over the floor. Ishihara Rina panicked and picked up the manuscript paper that had fallen to the ground, and found that the scattered manuscript papers were all filled with 4-frame comics. After she finished sorting the comics in order, she stared blankly at the contents of the comics. The content is not much, but the first half of Rina's life is described with amazing power. From the lonely kindergarten life, to the company of her parents, to the day when the strong wind swept the fallen leaves, to the broken family of 3, to the girl who went out to work, but found that she could no longer communicate with outsiders. Rina Ishihara slowly raised a question mark. She didn't expect that he already knew so many things. In the past, looking at the comic content and looking in the mirror might have made her sad, but now that she has someone by her side, she feels a little depressed. She became curious. Because she knew that Asahi Kazuma didn't like poking scars on people, she continued to read. She saw her first encounter with Lily online, saw someone wielding a knife and killed Xiao Shangqiao, and then was killed by the little knight with one hit. The mottled light and shadow cast by the shade of the tree gave the young man's cold expression a hazy halo, making the girl peeking behind the door blush. When Ishihara Rina saw this, her expression became anxious. An urge to leave the earth directly arises. It's over, it's over. When did he find out? Just when she was so embarrassed that her hands began to shake, the boy's dialogue on the next page of the comic made her stunned. Also in the dark room, the boy spent a lot of effort and finally locked Ishihara Rina's Twitter account. It was not an accidental encounter, but an encounter that the boy actively chose after hearing about the experience called Ishihara Rina. Summer cicadas, weeping willows, and Tokyo sky tree. School, playground, and cherry blossoms in Ueno. Graduation, holding hands, and Biwogo's wedding dress. Incredibly strong emotions seemed to seep out of the paper. The scene was fixed on the wedding of the two at the Meiji shrine. The white hair was flying, and the young man's grace was still there, stretching out his hand towards her. Want to follow? The comic ends here. Ishiharina stared at the scene blankly, and suddenly a bright smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Yes, I will follow. You used a comic to send her an invitation at the end of the comic. The innocent Ishiharina was laughing in the sun, while you held her hand tightly. This was a wordless dialogue, but it made Ishiharina truly I understand what you mean. What has always troubled Ishiharina is that she can't tell whether you are pitying her or simply wanting to hug her. Now she understands, there is no such thing as unexpected romance, but it gives you the peace of mind that is rooted in reality. So on this day, she came to the dark tennis court. When you looked at her, she mustered up her lifelong courage and shouted at you in front of everyone, Kinya Kazuma, Ju won't lose. You smiled, feeling as if something had been untied from your body. The pressure that had been trapped in the dust was released with that call. Ryo Kawanishi lost. He still doesn't understand why his opponent suddenly became stronger. After the game, he extended his hand to you in good faith and asked if love gave you strength. You looked at him with a strange look and said, it's just because she's not around and I've been worrying about her so I couldn't use my full strength /. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 30. So my sister has been running out every day during this period, just for this matter. Qian Yufengjian held a piece of draft paper with her fingers, and on it was the wedding dress she designed for herself. Rina Ishihara huddled in the corner, too aggrieved to speak. The manager of the bridal salon, who was standing aside, quietly walked to the door, closed the door, hung a closed today sign, and then hid upstairs. As if she saw the store manager walking away, her originally nervous expression relaxed a little, and she muttered, you want to get married? She gently rubbed Asahikazuma's legs with her feet. Seeing that he was not angry, she whispered, comics, I like them very much. When she said this, her voice was trembling. When she mentioned the comics, she recalled the time when he asked her if she wanted to take wedding photos. Asahikazuma obviously also remembered this matter, looked at Ishiharina steadily and said, so you are ready, you are not afraid of marriage, you just want to design a dress for me. Ishiharina nodded blankly, my family is rich, and I want to design a better looking set for you. She paused for a moment, bit her lower lip, and said slowly, a dress that only belongs to you. Asahikazuma looked at her blankly, and suddenly felt that some kind of persistence deep in his heart was shaken like never before. He looked at Ishiharina quietly and smiled wildly. Sister, this will make me want to eat you up and make everything about you mine. Ishiharina was a little embarrassed. There were people passing by outside the door, so she blushed and turned away her head. Qian Yukazuma stepped forward, held her face and leaned towards her. Ishiharina was inevitably shy, and for fear of being seen, she whispered, you can go home as long as you like, which made Asahikazuma anxious. Sister, close your eyes and don't be disobedient. Ishiharina was shocked. She always listened to his words, but she closed her eyes and froze, motionless. Her mind was in a mess, thinking about whether Asahikazuma should kiss her directly. When she thought that the store manager upstairs might come down at any time, her pretty eyelashes trembled slightly in nervousness. A feeling of warmth made her body tremble slightly, and then she moved closer to Kinhakazuma and leaned against her ear, saying in an extremely soft voice, Sister, from today on, you are my prey. She subconsciously opened her eyes, and then she saw Kinhakazuma opening a delicate small box, and he gently put an exquisite ring on the ring finger of her left hand. You fell into my trap. He kissed the back of Ishiharina's hand and said playfully. Ishiharina blinked her twinkling eyes and looked at the scene blankly. The next moment, Her panicked expression gradually became calmer, and she said those words as if she had spent her entire life. "Mr. Kazuma, is it possible for a person like me, who is rotting in the dead corner of the room, to walk in the sunshine? Maybe the sun will turn around and jump on you." Then she slowly leaned forward and buried her head in her arms. The drawing board and manuscript papers in her hands were scattered on the floor, but she didn't care at all. "You caught me." Click. In the corner, the proprietress of the wedding parlor took the photos quietly, snorted and said, "I am professional in wedding photos." While the two people hugging each other didn't notice her, she quietly went upstairs to print out the photo. "If possible, it would be better if you can leave a copy of the photo negative in the wedding salon." System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement Love Affair Asaba Kazuma /U0026 amp, Ishihara Rina, achievement points add 5. After you two finished making out, Ishihara Rina finally realized that she was still outside after she hurriedly apologized to the landlady. The landlady handed her a photo. Ishihara Rina looked at the photo above of hugging each other, with a happy expression on her face, and asked how much it would cost to take this away. The proprietress smiled and told her that the new store opened and she would take it away for free, but she hoped that she would be in charge of the wedding photos. You and Rina Ishihara agreed. On the day when the engagement was officially announced, many of your comic fans and career fans were arguing on Twitter. You helped Rina Ishihara fight back without giving any face during this period. Rina Ishihara sat beside you in a cute way, quietly watching this scene. She carefully put the photo into the photo frame. On the back of the translucent photo frame, you could vaguely see the handwriting written by Rina Ishihara with a beautiful pen. "I want to treasure that bright afternoon carefully. It was the happiest moment in my life. This year, you got married, and the person in charge of your wedding was the proprietress of the bridal shop. You fulfilled your promise. Your parents were caught off guard by your sudden marriage, but they still sent you blessings after all. Rina Ishihara is really cute." System prompt: you have unlocked the achievement Destiny Sansei Asaba Kazuma /U0026 amp, Ishihara Rina, achievement points add 10. Dark tennis has been stabilized by you. You who have become famous no longer need to stand for this competition. More and more competitions are taking place in this arena every year. There are extremely fierce competitions, even as high as in the 4 major tennis events. When Rina Ishihara came to the front as your wife and now the main artist of the Prince of Tennis, she stunned the world. Female fans who were extremely hurt by your marriage in the early years cast her envious eyes. 15 years later, more than a dozen consortiums deeply involved in the field of biomedicine jointly announced that they have discovered that there are individuals with special genes in the human population. Individuals with these genes will survive a high fever and will have abilities far beyond ordinary people in some fields. Talent. In the same year, rumors broke out in various countries around the world that some companies implanted special genes into fertilized eggs to artificially cultivate geniuses. However, due to unstable technology and uneven awakening, most newborns died early, which aroused strong criticism from all walks of life, including Genji Group. But these things have nothing to do with you and her. You spent a happy life. End of simulation. When Asaba Kazuma opened his eyes, there was a little melancholy on his face. "It's finally over." His eyes glanced at the wall of the simulation space, wanting to see what kind of evaluation it was. This evaluation was unexpected, but within reason. Achievements of this round: running in both directions. Love score, 91 points. Evaluation: the lily outside the window has bloomed, and it has someone who can protect itself. Settlement: you have absorbed the essence of Ishihara Rina, gained the talents of modeling and color sensitivity, and gained the skill painting expertise. When he opened his eyes again, he had returned to real life. What a beautiful encounter. Kinya Kazuma raised a smile at the corner of her mouth and looked at the windowsill subconsciously. Under the moonlight, the windowsill was clean and tidy. In the dark room, on the big bed on the side near the windowsill, a figure was curled up into a ball, with a vague mess of long hair hanging down beside the bed. On the hangers on the side are all loose t-shirts and shirts, piled up in a messy manner. Commonly used equipment such as water bottles, kettles, and electric water heaters are neatly placed in the corner of the room. The girl on the bed rolled over and got up in a daze. It seems like I had a beautiful dream, but why am I so sad when I wake up? She turned her head and looked out the window. The cool night breeze was blowing, and under the moonlight, she could vaguely see a cluster of blooming flowers outside the window. It's a pity that it was just a dream after all. I'm still crouching in the corner, and no night will come to save me. She suddenly remembered something and took out Twitter to search for Dark Tyrannosaurus Warrior. Soon, a familiar avatar appeared. Her eyes widened in confusion, and she laughed softly, but a tear fell on the bed sheets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Hui. Chapter 31. Chienu Kazuma took a good bath, and only after suppressing her inner emotions did she start to sort out her gains. The gains from this round of simulation far exceed the sum of the gains from all previous simulations. If it were normal, he should take stock of his gains as soon as possible, and then happily start to calculate how far he can use these gains in reality. But he still soaked in the bathtub for a long time before suppressing his gushing emotions. Although he repeatedly emphasized that he had cut the simulation from reality, when he returned to normal, real life, he would forget those people, forget those things, and forget her existence. But he knew that the happiness gushing out of his heart was definitely not a lie. For a moment, he really thought that he could just fall in love like this. Snapped. Kinyu Kazuma slapped himself in the face. Kinyu Kazuma, what's wrong with you? We agreed to worship the electronic moon, but what about cyber love? How come you get excited after simulating it once? But one thing is for sure. Ishihara Rina, you have spent so much of my time, energy, and you'd better pray that you are not that bad in reality, otherwise I will directly trap you by my side. But what concerned him more was the finale leading to the final period of the simulation. A trace of worry flashed across Asuha Kazuma's face. Although the results are not directly explained in the game, everyone knows that once people know the existence of adjusted genes and can artificially create geniuses, it will inevitably cause a huge shock around the world. Whether it is for their own descendants or for themselves, I don't know how many people will directly join the field of adjusters. No wonder Dr. Funakoshi would directly remind him to carefully protect Rina Ishihara. If this is thrown into the world of the demonic Forbidden City next door, I am afraid that we will directly establish an academy city, collect adjusters, and create an independent force. Fortunately, this matter is easy to solve. As long as you have enough status in reality, that's fine. He is still very confident about this. Do you really think that he chose the object of simulation just to see how big it was? You know, just from the initial stage, my Rina got her first pot of gold much faster than Lily Garcia. Forget it, don't think about it so much now. He looked back at the simulation panel. First, click on the reward obtained from Rina Ishihara after the simulation was successful. Let's start with skills. Painting specialization, derived from Ishihara Rina's painting skills. She has unique advantages in character creation and scene creation, and has expressive power that shocks even traditional masters. With it, you will become the undefeated king of cartoonists, provided you stop making toilet paper. Asaba Kazuma, 6. He felt like he was being manipulated by the simulator. What does it mean not to make toilet paper? Contemporary young people are tired enough. When they have free time to read some novels and comics, they just want to watch some refreshing plots that free their brains. This is called catering to the market. It seems that this crappy simulator doesn't understand it at all. He thought for a moment. The reason why you talk so much is probably because you haven't extracted enough residual value from it. Continue next time. Then he looked at the talent. He is more interested in talent than Ishihara Rina. If skills allow you to directly have the means to realize your talents, then on top of having talents, you can also have the possibility to further develop your existing abilities. Skills represent the present. But talent represents the future. Even if the simulator disappears one day, he will still be able to dominate with his talent. He first clicked on the talent styling. Styling, the genes Ishihara Rina was born with gave her amazing insight and shaping power for all changes in characters, scenes, structures, etc. before she awakened. It can be inserted into the body as a regulatory gene. Qian Yufengjian pondered for a moment. Sure enough, is the so-called talent the adjustment of genes themselves? It's just that Rina Ishihara is a natural rough stone, and she is an adjuster who has been implanted with adjustment genes through special means. It seems that I have underestimated Rina Ishihara's talent a little too much. Just based on the evaluation given by the simulator, with this talent, he has a unique advantage in any design field. If this is the case, then his arrangements for Rina Ishihara in reality may have to be slightly changed. He clicked on color acuity again. Color sensitivity, the gene Ishihara Rina was born with gave her a very high ability to observe and control colors before she was awakened, and she had an ingenious use of colors. It can be inserted into the body as a regulatory gene. Qian Yufengma nodded. You don't need to go into details to know that having this adjustment gene will have amazing bonuses in comics, illustrations, traditional paintings, and even animation production and game production. All I can say is that she is a talented girl certified by the simulator. There is no doubt that Rina Ishihara's gains are huge, but Asaba Kazuma knows that the gains from this simulation are definitely more than that. He clicked on the achievement store. The first thing that pops up is a prompt window. Simulation exceeds 90 points in one game, attributes and props have been unlocked. He looked towards the achievement store. Wealth add 200,000 yen, unlimited time/price, 1 point. Function detector, temporary activity, digestion potion, unlimited time/price, 1 point. Results light novel Did I make a mistake when I was reincarnated as a succubus, extended full version, with exquisite illustrations, Prince of Tennis full color/black and white version, tennis ability gift pack, unlock/price, 1 point. Attributes intelligence add 1, charm add 1, physical strength add 1, unlock/limited purchase/price, 1 point. Props charm potion, mechanical training ruler, 1 minute invisibility potion, magic collar, unlock/refreshed every simulation round/price, 1 point. Asahi Kazuma finally couldn't help but laugh. In the simulator, I can work harder next time. There is no need to think about it at all. The most valuable things in the achievement store that must be exchanged must be attributes and achievements. Attributes determine the upper limit of your body in reality, which is based on your own fundamental changes. Achievements can directly change your own economic situation and background in reality. Every exchange is accelerating for the next simulation. This point has been vividly reflected in the simulation. After receiving his painting skills, Ishihara Rina's own painting skills grew much faster than the previous simulation. The more complete reincarnated succubus and related illustrations will take off faster in the simulation, make more money, and get better reviews. Select attributes intelligence add 1, charm add 1, physical strength add 1 and buy. Select results light novel Did I make a mistake when I was reincarnated as a succubus, extended full version, with exquisite illustrations, the Prince of Tennis full color/black and white version, tennis ability gift pack and buy it. Select function digestion potion and buy it. Achievement points -7. Qian Yufengma slowly closed his eyes. Now it's harvest time. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui Xiang. Chapter 32. When the alarm rang again, it was already daytime. When Asahi Kazuma got up from the bed, she felt her body was light, as if something was different. After taking a shower, looking at myself in front of the mirror, I always feel a little more energetic. Is it because of improved physical fitness? Or is it for other reasons? Asahi Kazuma doesn't know. He is going to school. After getting in the car, he chose a corner that was not easily squeezed into, hid in it, and played a Russian radio broadcast to speed up his absorption of Russian knowledge. What surprised him was that he could clearly feel that the speed of absorbing Kimura Fairy's Russian memory was accelerating. Just from the perspective of thinking, it seems that the intelligence added by attribute points is more about learning ability. It is impossible to expect oneself to be as smart as a demon. Perhaps it was because Rina Ishihara rewarded him too many times this time. Even with the use of digestive potions, he was far from able to absorb all these memories. Asahi Kazuma estimated that during this period of time, he would have to wait for himself to digest it in his sleep. I just don't know what Rina Ishihara is doing now. Kinya Kazuma's thinking was a little divergent. As the bus stopped, another group of people rushed onto the bus. He pulled on his clothes and felt that after the space became narrower, it became much hotter and stuffier in the car. He vaguely heard girls whispering next to him. "Did you see that boy in the corner? He's good looking, he's not an idol of some kind, right? What are you thinking? Which idol can be a real top student? He is obviously wearing the uniform of Hakuin High School. Ah, that high school is famous for its high admission rate. I heard that quite a few students from that school are admitted to Tokyo University every year. That's why I want to criticize you. How could I not know if there really were idols of such high quality? In recent years, let alone idols, even the aesthetics of male publicists have been downgraded. What you said makes sense." Asahi Kazuma heard this funny. In previous lives, audiences have long suffered from ugly men in costumes, and this is also the case in Tokyo. Speaking of which, this was not the case before. When a girl, especially a pretty girl, secretly complimented him on the bus, the male compatriots around him would always cast envious and jealous looks. But this time, when he looked at his male compatriots from the corner of his eye, the faint malice disappeared. Even a male office worker showed a gentle smile when he looked at me, as if he saw something eye-catching. Not only did he not feel uncomfortable being stared at by everyone, he actually raised his head and smiled at the girls who were staring at him. The girls who were whispering stopped talking. Ashamed. In class this morning, Asahi Kazuma's most intuitive feeling was that he was asked more questions by the teacher. Especially the female teacher, who almost always asked him to get up to answer questions. It wasn't until he showed a troubled expression on his face that the teacher let him go with some embarrassment. On his way back to the classroom at noon, he met Mr. Haruna Hayakawa. Teacher Hayakawa gave him a critical blow at the beginning. "Asabi-san, you finally don't look a little sick today." Asabi Kazuma shook his head in confusion. "Mr. Hayakawa, stop teasing me. I was asked 11 times in the morning, and you asked the most questions." Hayakawa Haruna laughed playfully and said, "I can't help it. Teacher always has enough preference for things that are eye-catching. Who told Asabi-san to look good today? This is not what a young teacher should say. If there are any rumors, you might get in trouble. I'm just praising you as a normal teacher," she said with some dissatisfaction, gently shook the milk bottle in her hand, and said, "Besides, it's impossible, I don't have much respect for boys your age. Interested, I like something more mature and reliable." Asabi Kazuma was surprised. So in the eyes of Mr. Hayakawa, am I a very unreliable boy? Hayakawa Haruna shook her head. "You are too young. I like someone older." He could actually see that Haruna Hayakawa was telling the truth. Liking to see beautiful boys and liking beautiful boys are two different things. Just like Fairy Kimura, he never denies her beauty in the simulation and doesn't mind her staying nearby to beautify the surrounding environment, but if you say you like her, that's a bit ridiculous. Although these words were a bit inappropriate for him to say after he had occupied Rina Ishihara. Thinking of the time he spent with Rina Ishihara in the simulation, he couldn't help but smile. Hayakawa Haruna was stunned for a moment, then walked over helplessly and patted him on the shoulder, saying, "You kid, I'll give you a piece of advice, don't smile so brightly at everyone, otherwise you won't be able to calm down and study in the past year and a half of being in high school." "I'll just take Mr. Hayakawa's words as a compliment for my appearance," Asahi Kazuma snorted. "I still have a little bit of confidence in my appearance." Suddenly I became a lot more confident, Hayakawa Haruna sighed, and then looked at him suspiciously and said, "Asaba-san, you didn't go to the coming-of-age ceremony yesterday, right? At your age, you are still studying, it's important, don't be fooled by bad women." The smile on Asaba Kazuma's lips froze for a moment, and after a while he continued to smile. "That's a seductive big sister, but Hayakawa-sensei and I are very similar." "I also like mature ones," Asaba Kazuma laughed playfully, and before Hayakawa Haruna could react, he ran past her. Hayakawa Haruna turned around to look at his running back, shook her head helplessly, and pushed her frame. "I like older people, I like older people." Hayakawa Haruna muttered twice, and suddenly remembered the boy's smile just now. Wow, it seems that being younger is not a problem. The moment the young man smiled, she suddenly felt a strong desire to ravage him. Fortunately, she had strong willpower and suppressed it. After taking some time to clear her mind of distracting thoughts, she thought to herself, "This little guy affects people's emotions. As expected, I should give him more homework in the afternoon." Teacher Hayakawa had an idea in his mind. By the time Asaba Kazuma finished handling everything, it was almost evening. When he came out of Mr. Hayakawa's office, he had a sad expression on his face. It was too much. I was immediately sanctioned. Taking the homework list assigned to her by teacher Hayakawa today, she returned to the classroom and prepared to pack her things and leave. However, he suddenly found a boy with dyed yellow hair sitting on his chair in the classroom that was supposed to be empty. He crossed his legs and looked impatient. After seeing him, the boy stood up and wanted to say something, and heard Asaba Kazuma say with a smile, "It's not impossible to make a short video." Shimura Kazuya was stunned for a moment. Why did this person rush to answer? Who told him the news? Satai? Asaba Kazuma opened the table, took out his skull bag, turned to Kazuya, who wanted him to help shoot videos and upload TikTok, and said, "Come and play tennis. If you can beat me, I might be able to agree to your more extreme request. If you lose, just keep your favorite tennis racket." Shimura Kazuya was stunned for a moment, and then a provocative smile appeared on his face. "Asaba Kazuma, I have never seen you in the tennis club. You don't think you can beat me without practicing, do you?" Qian Yufengjian spread his hands. "Are you going to fight or not? You will regret this." Shimura Kazuya decided to let this kid lose a big game. It didn't matter anything about making videos. He wanted to make this guy understand that tennis is not such a simple thing. "Who do you think I am? I'm Shimura Kazuya from the tennis club." Location, Hakuin High School Tennis Court. Time, 20 minutes later. Shimura Kazuya stood on the court with a blank mind. He didn't even understand how he lost. This was no longer a complete defeat, but a complete explosion. He lost his favorite racket and lost all his confidence. Asahi Kazuma, who was standing opposite him, stretched out and said with a smile, "I accepted the tennis racket. It feels good to have someone come out as a punching bag when you are unhappy." As he spoke, he picked up his backpack and walked out of the tennis court. He seemed to remember something. He turned back to the confused Shimura Kazuya and said, "You're not even close yet."